When it comes to anime games here, the Dragon Ball series is one that's no stranger to that. The franchise has not certainly been losing steam for any amount of time, or at least that's what we thought. With the recent success of Dragon Ball FighterZ, Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, and all of the other mobile games on the market currently, we only could figure what was next for the franchise here. And instead of looking toward the future, it would seem that instead, Bandai Namco had other plans in mind, and would actually be looking to the past for the latest entry in the Dragon Ball series here. That's right, a brand new Budokai Tenkaichi game has suddenly been announced after nearly 16 years of this franchise lying completely and utterly dormant, with the exception of Ultimate Tenkaichi, but we don't talk about that one here. No. For at last, our wish has finally been heard and granted. At least that's what it seems like for the time being, as a brand new Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi is officially in the works. As a new Budokai Tenkaichi is set to begin. Now, with all this hype recently here at the beginning of the month, when this trailer originally dropped, what's next for this franchise now? This long dormant series of 3D anime fighting has now seemingly been revived out of completely nowhere. As someone who grew up with the Budokai Tenkaichi series of games, as well as the original Budokai series on the PlayStation 2 from back in the early 2000s, this is something out of complete left field that took me honestly by surprise, guys. I never truly thought we'd get another mainline entry into this series after so many years. And like I said, I guess the publisher for the Dragon Ball games have actually been taking a listening to the fan base here and given us one of our many wishes here, which is honestly a miracle in and of itself. Seeing as how Bandai Namco has been a tad slow when it comes to providing DLC for Dragon Ball FighterZ, with the recent addition of implementing rollback netcode, that's all that's set to really come out for that game, besides the latest version of Android 21. So no other characters. I mean, come on, where's my boy Raditz, am I right? But that aside, wishing for Raditz here and a few other, at least in my opinion, stable characters in the Dragon Ball franchise, that's it for FighterZ. That's basically a wrap, and that's all they wrote. As that game is seemingly riding out into the sunset now, as the player count continues to fluctuate rapidly, I guess it only seems to make sense that, well, what was the next step for the Dragon Ball franchise here? A new Budokai Tenkaichi, though, after so long of waiting, and waiting, and waiting, this is completely something that I would never have dreamed of in 1,000 years. Or should I say, this is something I would never have dreamed of in over 9,000 years. Because seeing as how popular this franchise really was back in the day, with all the characters you could have all the versions of Goku, all the versions of Vegeta, Gohan, Trunks, Piccolo, Krillin even, our Lord and Savior Yamcha, Tien Shinhan, even Chaozu you could play as. Like, who wants to play as Chaozu? But you could. That was an option. Just for the people, the one or two people that really wanted to. There you go. Also, all the Saiyans, Raditz, Nappa, Vegeta when he was evil in the Saiyan Saga. It's all here. Everything from the Saiyan Saga in Dragon Ball Z, to the Frieza Saga, the Android Saga, the Cell Saga, the Buu Saga, the Babidi Saga, the Majin Vegeta Saga, the Fusion Saga, and then culminating in the ultimate final battle against Kid Buu in the Supreme Kai's world here. This is one massive roster. And while I do know that this is never going to be probably replicated, without DLC of course, backing it up, this is impressive for even its time, as this game had to reuse a lot of different movesets and animations to really help make these characters work and feel somewhat distinct. How could I possibly forget? Having the original Goku from the original Dragon Ball is an honest-to-goodness no-brainer here. Couple him with King Piccolo, with his own sort of different moveset from the series, and you got two characters right there representing original OG Dragon Ball. Now I know Master Roshi's also thrown in there as well, but if we had to keep this list a tad short, then I would say Kid Goku, King Piccolo, Master Roshi, perhaps General Tao and General Blue representing the Red Ribbon Army saga, and maybe one or two other characters that are just there for comedy, but also are able to show off the wackiness and the humor behind Akira Toriyama's vision when it comes to Dragon Ball. Because, as you guys probably already know, Dragon Ball was originally a gag manga, and then would develop into the more shonen-esque, action-adventure, fantasy-type story that it is today, with all the different power levels and whatnot. With that being said, though, for the original Dragon Ball, that about does it, I'd say, to try and keep this roster somewhat limited, but able to touch on the important characters here that really matter, and would do a good job at representing the original origins of Goku here and where he came from. As King Piccolo was his one true first real rival, you could say, and villain, due to the Red Ribbon Army being a little bit more on the comedic side and not really posing much of a threat at all, if I'm being honest, as Goku was able to take them all out, with the exception of course, Dr. Gero, aka Dr. Gero, single-handedly, by himself, with no help at all. So Goku was a monster back then, and that would only really prove to be excellent foreshadowing for what he would become later on, as the series would progress and expand on the lore and the mythology behind Goku's power, and where he truly hails from. And that, of course, being one of the Saiyans from space, colonizing planets and taking them over. But with that being said, speaking of Goku, one character that cannot be sorely missed here is his father, that being Bardock, the noble low-class warrior Saiyan from planet Vegeta. Bardock is one that I know gets overlooked a lot, but in more recent years has received a lot more love from the fan base, seeing him get even a new form, that being the original Super Saiyan transformation, in order to have his popularity completely soar to new and utter heights. Bardock is a character that, like I said, that used to be overlooked immensely, that deserves a lot more love from the franchise. In recent years, thanks to Dragon Ball FighterZ, Dragon Ball Xenoverse 2, and all the other mobile games tying in here and culminating in a sort of renaissance, you could say, for this low-class Saiyan warrior, who, despite the odds, has managed to be a mainstay and a staple when it comes to Son Goku here and his heritage. So, touching on Goku's heritage here, there are a lot of other characters that will probably not make it into this roster, but we can always try and hope for the best, am I right? So for me, that's why it's also important to include characters from not only Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, but of course, the other Dragon Ball movies as well. What do I mean by that? Well, besides Bardock, there is also one other movie originally that debuted that showcased a different sort of story, a side story you could say, that being the history of Trunks, aka the origin of how Trunks traveled back in time from his own dimension to the timeline where Goku and our heroes were originally still alive at, right after the defeat of Frieza, but before Goku arrived on planet Earth to deal with him and his father, King Cold. The mysterious youth known as Trunks would show up and defeat Frieza single-handedly. After this, though, Goku did arrive on Earth as pre-planned, but this would then cause a ripple effect, creating an alternate timeline in and of itself. So, speaking of timelines here, though, one other character in addition to this mysterious youth known as Trunks, a future version of Gohan, that grew up and seemingly mastered and learned the art of becoming a Super Saiyan all by himself, while the rest of the Z Fighters were seemingly killed off and picked apart one by one by this malevolent threat known as the androids, who would be created, of course, by Dr. Gero of the Red Ribbon Army, due to Goku not seeming to have defeated him when he had the opportunity to in the original Dragon Ball, would seek revenge against Goku and his friends for all of the pain and suffering that Goku seemingly had caused him, all those many, many moons ago. And so the Mad Doctor had proved he was able to strike back, and with a vengeance as well, as these biological, mechanical killing machines would stop at nothing until Goku and his friends were all eliminated. However, though, there would still be hope, as Gohan, the last of his kind it would seem, at least on Earth, as far as we're aware in this timeline, was able to fend off both these androids for a short but impressive amount of time, before, however, ultimately being taken out by one of the androids in a brutal attack that left him badly beaten and left for dead, which would unfortunately be his fate in this timeline. However, there was one fighter, though, that would stand up to these threats, that being Trunks, the son of Vegeta and Bulma, the mysterious time traveler who would step up and avenge everyone, including his master, Gohan. Trunks was one that was not afraid to step in and fight if it came to helping those around him. And with that resolve in hand, Trunks would do anything and everything to bring this threat down to its knees and restore peace and order to his time. Trunks did at least accomplish his goal, and for the time being, it would seem, peace was restored to this timeline, and things were returning to normal, as the threat of the androids would soon become but a distant memory. However, that wouldn't have stopped Trunks, though, from becoming another popular character along with Bardock in Goku's wide array of friends and foes alike. Trunks is another character that I can see definitely fitting in to a new Budokai Tenkaichi game here, as he is one that definitely deserves a spot among the roster, without a doubt. Now, which version of Trunks, though, is a whole another statement in and of itself, and that can go off in a few different branching conversations here. To keep things simple, though, here, what we're going to do is have this TV special version of him as one character and his Super Saiyan transformation, all in one character slot. So that could be Trunks and future Gohan and Bardock and Frieza, and then Android 17 and 18 along with Dr. Gero. And then the other characters here we'll touch upon a little bit more once we get to them. Why don't we take that a step further and explore a few of the more popular Dragon Ball movies that have been shown in the franchise here as a sort of what-if scenario in an alternate dimension, at least I like to think so. So the first one being The Return of Cooler, which is the 5th Dragon Ball movie and debuted between after Goku would have come back from planet Namek, but right before the androids show up to seemingly terrorize the Earth and exterminate all life on the planet. This movie is perhaps a good little interesting recap of the Frieza saga and a sort of interesting retelling of it at the same time, seeing as how throughout the course of the film, Goku is constantly being pushed back by Cooler and his elite squad of warriors, known as Cooler's Armored Squadron. And then culminating at the end of the film, Goku powers up and unleashes his untamed power and ascends to a Super Saiyan, seemingly for, I guess you could say for the first time, seeing as how he does have a lot more control, it would seem, when he initially transforms, lets himself completely go to the power that he's just acquired, and completely dominates Cooler, pushing him back into a corner, and then having him reveal his own transformation, that being his Shredder-like form that has his power magnified. Cooler would seemingly bring Goku down to his knees with his newfound power as well. Goku would thankfully come out on top and restore peace to the planet, as Frieza's brother was seemingly vanquished and destroyed, along with his entire group of soldiers here. For when Cooler did return yet again, it was on a completely different planet, a newer version of planet Namek, where he then would fuse with a giant machine known as the Big Gete Star, while he would seek revenge for his past defeat. So right there would be two different versions of Cooler if we put Cooler in his base form with his transformation into the Shredder-like form as one character, and then his metal form and his Meta Cooler form in a separate character slot to give them a bit of a distinction between those two versions of Cooler. Now then, moving on, we have another very, very popular movie character who needs no introductions here, that being the legendary Super Saiyan known as Broly. Broly originally debuted in the Dragon Ball film known as Broly the Legendary Super Saiyan. Broly would go on to earn 2 more films in the franchise, as well as a more recent adaptation that was acting as a reboot to bring his character into the modern era of Dragon Ball, known as Dragon Ball Super Broly. When he was born, Broly had an unbelievably high power level that made even King Vegeta, Vegeta's father and ruler of planet Vegeta, scared to death. Left to die at the mercy of King Vegeta, Broly would find himself stranded, along with his father Paragus, in the scrap piles of the planet's underbelly. Forced to survive or die trying, Broly and his father made their way to a new planet not far from planet Vegeta, but before its destruction at the hands of Frieza. Broly and Paragus then would have found refuge in this new place and would wait for many, many years to enact their revenge for deserting him and Broly and leaving them to die. Alone, without any help, it would have seemed that that was the end for the two. Until many, many years later, Broly came across Goku. And upon seeing Goku, after so many years, this triggered something unsettling within Broly, and a horrible transformation was about to take place. Ever since encountering Goku for the first time in many years, Broly's new power was now unleashed. Achieving a state similar to the Super Saiyan transformation, Broly's power overwhelmed all of the Z Fighters, taking on not only Goku, but Gohan, Trunks, Vegeta, and the likes of Piccolo, all at the same time, with no sort of drawbacks or limiters on his power. And it would seem that no one was able to stop Broly, until at the very end of the first film, where Goku was able to combine all of his energy with the help of his friends and vanquish Broly once and for all. Broly would be a very good addition, and seems like another no-brainer here, combined with Cooler and Bardock, and future Gohan as well, to form a nice section that would help represent the vast variety when it comes to the Dragon Ball spin-off movies. Speaking of spin-offs here, why don't we move on to a different series? While Dragon Ball Super is obviously going to be getting representation here, another series though that doesn't get quite as much love as I feel it rightfully should is Dragon Ball GT. So Dragon Ball GT initially takes place, but it's at least to have been implied to have been a few years after the end of Dragon Ball Z, where Goku flies off with Oob, the reincarnation of the bad part of Majin Buu, known as Kid Buu, and flies off into the sunset, taking Oob with as his pupil in order to train him to become the next protector of Earth. With Oob by his side, Goku would seemingly have been leaving his family and friends behind again, including Vegeta, who swears to never fight again unless it's to duke it out and settle the score with his one-time rival, Goku. As Goku and Oob were training, Goku would eventually, though, be turned into a child by the likes of Emperor Pilaf, one of the original Dragon Ball villains, who would also earn a spot on this roster for me. After Emperor Pilaf turned Goku into a child, Goku would set out to recover the Dragon Balls across the galaxy to make things right once again before the planet explodes. Thanks to Emperor Pilaf's doing, Goku, Trunks, and Pan, the son of Videl and Gohan, would have a lot of work to do. As the trio made their way around the galaxy, they had many, many, many adventures together. One day, though, they stumbled upon a unique planet that was unlike anything they had previously discovered before. That being the planet known as M2. Toward the end of their journey there, Goku, Trunks, and Pan uncovered one of the most diabolical villains they'd ever meet in the franchise, that being the creature and life form known as Baby, a test subject that was being created by one of the Tuffles, aka Sufurians. Rivalry though against the Saiyans, this helped build up Baby to be one of the more interesting villains throughout Dragon Ball GT's entire run. Baby is able to manipulate and infect other people like a virus, jumping from host to host in order to claim more power and to have a better host in order to battle against Goku and fulfill his duty to have revenge. Eventually, though, coming across Gohan, an older Goten, and eventually Vegeta, Baby would have his way with the entire population of Earth, and seemingly have conquered it before Goku shows up and kicks him where it hurts. After a long drawn-out battle, Goku and Baby are transported to a different planet where their fight continues, and Goku reaches a new form of Super Saiyan. This form is known as Super Saiyan 4, a more primal version of the Super Saiyan lineage, and one that taps into the power of the original transformation that Goku had in the original Dragon Ball, known as the Uzaru, aka Grade 8. So having Super Saiyan 4 as a transformation is a no-brainer as well here, and we can jot that one down for Goku. But also his original form, the Uzaru, Grade 8. So that would add 2 more transformations here. So this roster is already getting a little bit big in scope. But we're not done just yet. For Dragon Ball GT wasn't simply one saga. Oh no, it had multiple sagas. And those sagas, while not exactly the best in execution and animation, did provide a lot to enhance the lore and mythology of the Dragon Ball franchise. So, on that note, why don't we go ahead here and keep diving into the world of Dragon Ball GT and see what other characters we can pick out that deserve a spot on this roster for a potential Budokai Tenkaichi 4. If that's even what the name of it will be. For all we know, it can just be a Dragon Ball game that's in the Budokai Tenkaichi style here, with the higher definition graphics. And perhaps it will just share the same name, and perhaps it'll just have Budokai Tenkaichi on it, but it will be a new version, and it will be essentially Tenkaichi 4 in gameplay and spirit and content and whatnot. But in actuality, it'll just say Dragon Ball or Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi. As long as we get the other sagas though, like from Dragon Ball Super, and the other movies, like the new Broly movie with Gogeta making his reappearance as well, the fusion of Goku and Vegeta, who's a mainstay, and originally appeared in the movie known as Dragon Ball Fusion Reborn, would also make nice additions to this roster as well. Along with Gogeta though, and Broly, the villain from the Fusion Reborn movie with Gogeta, known as Janemba, an evil entity who was comprised of a lot of different bad souls that were in the otherworld afterlife, would also deserve a spot on the roster. So you got Gogeta, Janemba, and what have you. And let's not forget Broly, of course, with all his different forms, such as his new version of Legendary Super Saiyan, which is currently just being called Broly Full Power, so we can mark that down for Broly. But now let's keep things back on track here for Dragon Ball GT, for we're not done quite yet. For Dragon Ball GT, there are a lot of characters, but a lot of them aren't going to make the cut. They simply don't have enough moves to be able to be utilized in a 3D fighting game like this. So, with that being said, we could also go then from the Baby Saga to the Super 17 Saga and have Super Android 17, the culmination of 2 different versions of Android 17 that seemingly fused into one being and gave Goku a hard time while even in Super Saiyan 4 form. So we can add Super 17 to the roster and then basically move on from there. So after this point, there was one last saga that was truly important in Dragon Ball GT, and that was the Black Star Dragon Ball Saga. So from this saga, we could add Omega Shenron, aka his pre-transformed state known as Sin Shenron, as well as all of the other Shadow Dragons, the manifestation of the Dragon Ball's power being overused by the Z Fighters over the years, and taking on a physical appearance. So adding all the Shadow Dragons, if their movesets are able to be implemented and used properly, that would be almost 10 character slots right there. So with the Shadow Dragons being added there too, this roster is getting beefy, but we're not through yet. With the obvious addition of Gogeta, there's one other form of Gogeta though that cannot be overlooked, that being Super Saiyan 4 Gogeta. And also on the same hand, Super Saiyan 4 Vegeta as well, because he also earned that form. So then you have right there 3 Super Saiyan 4s, Goku, Vegeta, and then their fusion, Gogeta. That's 3. And that just about does it for Dragon Ball GT here. That's enough really. And we could have Goku as a kid in Dragon Ball GT go to Super Saiyan, maybe Super Saiyan 2 or 3, but then ultimately up to 4. And have Vegeta start in his base form and go to Super Saiyan, maybe Super Saiyan 2 if the developers are feeling inclined to include every form of Vegeta here, and then Super Saiyan 4. Enough though about GT, let's move on to Dragon Ball Super for a brief moment. Now for Dragon Ball Super, it's going to be extremely hard to pick and choose what characters make this cut and what characters do not and get left behind. That being said, we do have to include Lord Beerus, the God of Destruction, who was introduced in the Xenoverse series of games, as well as Dragon Ball FighterZ. How could you have a game here with the newer forms of Super Saiyans, such as Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan Blue? Right off the bat here, we have the Battle of Gods saga and the movie Dragon Ball Z Battle of Gods, which introduced Lord Beerus to the Dragon Ball franchise here. But also, we have his attendant, you could say, as a character named Whis, who would also be an interesting inclusion as well. So touching on the Battle of God saga here, we would then move on to have Frieza, who would be coming back after being revived with the help of the Dragon Balls, and his Golden Frieza form, as well as future Trunks as well, having his own new story arc across Dragon Ball Super's time, with his main villain being an evil version of Goku known as Goku Black. Goku Black would be one more character as well to add to this roster, and would have his own unique transformation, aka Super Saiyan Rose. So with Super Saiyan Rose, that would have Goku Black in one character slot, and then the rest of Super here would have to honestly be dwindled down a lot, because there are a lot of other characters that get introduced over the course of the remaining arcs that, of course, they're not all going to fit in this roster, but this is as far as I would say I'm going to go here in terms of my thoughts on who's going to make the cut or not in Dragon Ball Z Budokai Tenkaichi 4. What do you guys think, though? Do you guys think that any of these other kind of off-the-wall sort of Dragon Ball characters from Dragon Ball Super would make the cut in a Budokai Tenkaichi style game? Let me know your thoughts down below. I'd love to know if you guys grew up with this series as well and are excited for its revival. It seemingly has happened. Our wish has been granted. If you like this video, please be sure to give it a like and comment down below on what you loved about this the most, and if you're excited for the future of Dragon Ball game. I'll be sure to catch you guys all later, and until we meet again, remember to take care and have a good day. Until then though, guys, I'll catch you in the next one. See you next time.
Here goes! improved a lot, but it looks like I won this one.